In this video, we'll replace this simple array adapter with an adapter that can actually display real contact data. Beware though that this is an advanced topic, so if you're fresh to programming, you will want to skip this video and come back later. Let's have a look how that should look like. I've entered this data in the contact application of this emulator, and you can see that this list isn't simple anymore. It's not anymore consisting of only one text field per item, but instead you see a text field and a frame with a profile image. This frame is actually a quick contact badge. That's a widget in Android. If you tap or click on it, it will allow you to quickly access the contact's data, to call the contact, write an email, or look at the contact details. So that's part one. I've prepared a staff entry layout item. So double click on staffentry.xml. This time this is a relative layout, which performs a little better than a linear layout. In this layout I have this quick contact badge and a text view, and I'm telling the text view to be displayed to the right of this quick contact badge. This text view has an ID as well, is styled. And for the style of the quick contact badge, you see this question mark again, which just says, okay, put the name of the style you need from this attribute. So now that's what the adapter will use when it creates list items. Let's go to staff.java, it's a Java class. So now I want to replace these lines of code. But first let's recapitulate what we're trying to do. We'll be pulling content from the contacts application, hand that content to a specialized adapter, and let that specialized adapter fill up this specialized layout item. So now let's create this specialized kind of adapter. Within the class staff, we create an internal class, private final class staff cursor adapter, extends resource cursor adapter. A cursor comes into play whenever you deal with larger data sets. Leveraging our array as data was pretty simple, but if you have to juggle larger amounts of data, like for example, a complete list of all your contacts, things could get a little out of hand. So for those cases, the cursor is a special kind of result, which simply points at one single item of your result dataset, usually the first. So it doesn't load all the data at once, but a pointer at one item of the result set. We'll see that in action a little later. So now let's look at this squiggly line. It tells me that it needs to override a constructor. Let's pick the first one. So that every time we create a new staff cursor adapter, it knows how to delegate the creation to the superclass. We can delete this line. We just leave it like that. And then there's still some error. This class needs to implement further methods. I click on Add Unimplemented Methods, and that's the method bindView, which governs what happens when one of those items is created and the adapter wants to stuff data into it. So that's the minimum signature of a resource cursor adapter subclass. And I now have the skeleton of the component which will handle the data in our component. But now to the next question. How will we retrieve the data from the contacts application? That's the task of a content resolver. We want to retrieve the content of the context, so we need some sort of middleman component to resolve that content. So I create a property for that of type content resolver, and I call it content resolver. So now we have the class that can pull the data out of the contacts, and we have the part of our application that will put the data into the list. Now let's go to the onCreate method. Let's grab these code lines. Now let's instantiate the content resolver. Get one instance from this activity, get content resolver, there it is. Then let's create a cursor. We want the contacts. We take this from the internal context class of the context contract, content URI. The projection means the fields we want to retrieve. In this case, we only want the name and the picture and the ID of the contact, of course, but nothing else. We'll come back to that later. Selection is some sort of where statement, some where criterion. Selection args are arguments for that selection, and then we can specify a sort order. Let's begin with projection. We need to know which fields to retrieve from the contacts. At the beginning of the class, I'll insert some static constants. Contacts fields is an array of string containing the name of the fields I want to retrieve. The ID, the lookup key, the display name, and the photo ID. And for convenience, I've also provided constants for the indexes of those fields. So I'll take contacts fields and enter that here at projection. Next, selection, which means which contacts do I want to read. That's the string. I'll add this here. This is like a where statement in databases. So it says I want to retrieve the contacts which are not null, where the display name is not empty. By the way, let's get this a little down here. We'll come to that later. We don't need selection args, so I type null. And for sort order, I'll insert context display name plus collate localized ascending, which means that it'll sort the contacts in the way that's appropriate for the locale of your system. Then by entering start managing cursor, I'll tell this activity to manage this cursor, which basically means that I don't have to bother managing that cursor myself. And as you can see, what is missing is the adapter for this content, for this cursor. So enter this as well. And I create a new staff cursor adapter, which is our specialized cursor adapter we've created just before. And in this activity as a context, this layout item is a view to put that data in, and the cursor as the data. And what a cursor adapter does is that it takes this cursor and iterates over the results, and thus writes them into the list. Well, as soon as we implement some functionality. So now let's enter some more code and walk you through it. This is what the fully functional implementation of a staff cursor adapter will look like. There are a few imports to be done, so I hit Ctrl-Shift-O or Command-Shift-O on Mac. So now all errors are gone. Okay, so now let's walk through it. The constructor remains the same, which does nothing but instantiating the superclass resource cursor adapter. You've seen that bindView is a required method of this class. And this is called whenever the adapter is trying to stuff something into the list. But I've also inserted a new method called newView, which is called whenever one of those list items is created. And do that mainly because of this class. This is a class I have defined by myself. It's here. It does nothing more than holding a text view and a contact badge. I call this a tag. And the great simple thing is that I can define arbitrary data and put that into any kind of view by calling the method setTag. The reason for that is performance. As you have seen, overriding this method isn't required. Without that method, every time a view is bound through the bindView method, a new text view and a new contact badge will be created. By implementing the newView method, I'll do that once in advance and have a text view and a quick contact badge ready at hand when it comes to running this bindView method. So I create this arbitrary piece of data, stuff a reference to a text view and the badge into it, and append this to my view. So when it comes to the point that the adapter wants to fill the data, I retrieve that tag from the view, which gets handed through the first parameter. Then I retrieve the text I want to display from the cursor. I also remember the ID of this contact in this variable ID and the lookup key for that contact. That's because in Android, a contact can consist of several combined contacts. And then I bind a lookup URI, which is some sort of detail query, to the badge, so that it knows when it is clicked or tapped where it will have to look for the contact details. And I also prepare a URI for my contact, which I will use to look for a photo for this contact, with the method openContactPhotoInputStream, with which I ask the content resolver to return an image stream of the contact photo. If a photo, and thus an image stream, cannot be found, I set the image resource of that badge to a placeholder image, which I have placed in the drawable folder. Here it is. If a picture is found, I'll turn the image stream into a bitmap via the bitmap factory class and its method decodeStream. Finally, I tell the badge, okay, this is your image bitmap. Phew, so now that's pretty complex, isn't it? You might have to read this code over and over again a few times until you totally grasp it. So keep in mind that this and this tag class are there for performance reasons. You could get a reference to the layout item here or here instead. But like I said, we'd rather do it once and reuse that reference every time we need to bind data to the view. So again, we get a cursor, we take the name from it, we take the ID and the lookup key, tell the badge where it should look for details, look for the contact photo, and assign it to the badge. Let's save it and see if it works. That's the finalized version. Let's have a look. Click on Staff. And there it is. And as you can see, it has even retrieved my profile picture. And I can click on the badge to go to the contacts.